In the small town of Ann Arbor, in the state of Michigan, David finishes another day at school, and before he leaves, he decides to give a present to his friend Millie, with whom he is completely in love. Excited to have won a small snow globe from Paris, the young woman thanks her friend, and during the conversation, Mark appears and takes the object from the girl's hands. Annoyed by the bully's attitude, David asks him to return the gift to his friend, but the boy ignores him and throws the object into the frozen lake, causing the boy to try and retrieve it. As soon as he manages to retrieve the object, the ground around David begins to break up, causing the boy to fall into the freezing river. Desperate, Millie tries to run to her companion, but is stopped by Mark, who says that this will only make matters worse. Panicked at drowning, the young man ends up teleporting to one of the corridors of a library in the city, which leaves him extremely confused. Although he has no idea how he managed to do it, David is relieved to be alive and decides to return home. After being abandoned by his mother when he was still a child, the young man was forced to live with his father, who always mistreated him, and for this reason, he never had a happy life again. When the boy arrives on the scene, he is confronted by his father William, who asks him why he is soaking wet. Being in a state of shock after the incident, David doesn't answer him and locks himself in his room, causing the man to become furious and follow him into the room. Soon afterwards, William decides to break down the boy's door, but as soon as he enters the room, he realizes that his son has disappeared. At the same time, David returns to the public library and realizes that he has the ability to teleport wherever he wants. Trying to find a way to escape from there, he goes to the exit doors, but when he notices that he is completely locked in, the young man gets angry, causing him to teleport to his room at the same moment. Realizing that he finally has a chance to improve his life, the young man begins to prepare to leave, and before leaving, he goes to Millie's house. The young woman feels completely shaken. She believes that her friend has perished in the incident at the lake, but while crying in her bed, she hears something happening in her garden. On her way there, she finds the snow globe she received from David and is completely confused. So the boy goes to another town, and after renting a small hotel room, he goes to the local public square, where he practices his powers of teleportation. The problem is that David is still a beginner and ends up taking quite a tumble when he teleports into one of the trees. Sometime later, the young man returns to the hotel and starts analyzing his tourist guide while trying to use his powers to go to the most famous places in the city. Suddenly, David ends up teleporting into a building, and concludes that this is the place he had frequented in the past. Now that he has mastered his powers, the young man decides to go to the city's bank, where he asks one of the security guards to take him to the customer restroom. As he does so, he passes by the vault area and observes the place carefully, trying to memorize it. During the night, David prepares to break into the bank branch, and after collecting all his equipment, he teleports to one of the bathrooms in the building. He then uses his superhuman abilities to go inside the vault, where he begins to steal all the bank's money. After repeating the same process several times, David manages to accumulate large amounts of money, allowing him to buy everything he's ever dreamed of. As the years go by, David improves his powers more and more, and thanks to this, he has become an extremely wealthy young man, as well as living in a large luxury apartment, where he teleports around his home all the time. Despite possessing this superhuman ability, the young man doesn't care about helping other people and is only interested in looking after his own life. So David uses his powers for whatever he feels like doing, such as surfing on uninhabited beaches and enjoying the landscapes of Egypt from atop the great monuments of the desert. Meanwhile, in the middle of the forest, Roland and his squad of agents are hunting several people through the woods, where they use electric wire traps to stun them. It is revealed that the agents are actually hunters of jumpers, humans who have the ability to teleport, and who, when captured, are instantly eliminated by the group. During the night, David returns to his apartment and is surprised by Roland, who begins to interrogate him and tells him that he has been following the young man's tracks for more than 8 years. To escape the ambush, David uses his powers, but is stopped by the agent, who shocks him, preventing his teleportation from working. Now that he has managed to immobilize him, Roland attacks him again, asking how the young man can survive on his own for all these years without being caught by the hunters. Trying to escape, the young man looks in the direction of his photos, but thanks to the electricity coursing through his body, he can't teleport out of his apartment and ends up on the second floor. Using the ladder from the bookshelves, Roland chases David around the place and delivers another shock to his opponent, while asking him how he has been protecting himself all this time. As he receives no answer, the hunter throws the young man from the second floor, and then tries to finish him off with his staff. However, David manages to dodge the attack, but before he can get out of there, he is hit by one of Roland's traps, which attaches an electric cable to his body. Quickly, the young man teleports to his vault, and after using one of his tools to cut the wire, he uses his powers so that he can finally escape from the hunter. Furious, Roland contacts the Jumpers Hunters Communication Center and orders all agents to be summoned so that they can begin a search for David. The next day, the young man decides to visit Millie's house, and after meeting the girl's mother, who is extremely happy to see him again, he asks her about her friend's whereabouts. The woman reveals that Millie is working in one of the town's bars, and on hearing this, David sets off in the direction of the place. Realizing that his friend is living life well after everything that has happened, the young man decides to leave, but halfway there, he is intercepted by Mark, who recognizes him. Trying not to be detected, the jumper tries to get away from the man, but thanks to all the man's shouting, Millie ends up reunited with her friend. During the conversation, Mark begins to annoy the woman, causing David to become furious and attack the young man, punching him in the face. The man then drags his opponent outside and hits him with several punches and kicks. Believing that he has erased his enemy, Mark celebrates his victory, but at that moment, David throws himself towards the man, teleporting away at the same moment. As a result, the pair end up inside one of the bank's vaults, and noticing that he has been taken to another location in the blink of an eye, Mark is completely terrified and begs his opponent to leave him alone. So the jumper decides to return to the bar so that he can finally talk to his friend. Confused by the young man's disappearance, Millie asks where he's been all this time, and David decides to lie, saying that he got a great job at the bank, so he was able to get rich easily. At this point, the young man tells her that he is planning a trip to Rome, and as he knows that his friend has always dreamed of visiting that city, he invites her to accompany him. Without thinking twice, Millie accepts the invitation and together they set off for Rome. At the police station, Roland asks the head of the department to allow him to question Mark, who has filed a complaint against David, but the man ends up denying his request, saying that he can only allow him in when he shows a federal warrant. Angry, the hunter strikes the officer, causing him to lose consciousness and allowing the man to enter the interrogation room. Upon questioning the man, Roland discovers that his target is in the company of Millie, and that they have both just boarded a flight to Rome. In the tourist city, David and Millie decide to visit the famous Colosseum, but as soon as they arrive, one of the security guards reveals that the attraction is closed. Disgusted, the young man turns away from the guards and, using his power, opens one of the gates unnoticed and asks his friend to accompany him. So the couple continue exploring the buildings, without noticing that they are being watched by a mysterious young man who is hiding on top of the buildings. During his search, David is intercepted by Griffin, who reveals that he has the same powers as the young man. Noticing that he is not the only one with superhuman abilities, the young man is extremely confused and asks how this is possible. Griffin explains that despite being extremely powerful and difficult to track, jumpers will always be in danger, as they are often followed by hunters. At that moment, a pair of agents appear on the scene, and in order to avoid being captured again, David teleports to the upper floor, while Griffin prepares to face the men with his baseball bat. Although he manages to get some distance from the ambush, the young man ends up getting caught in one of the traps and is pulled back into the center of the Colosseum. Realizing that his friend might be in trouble, Griffin teleports around the site with extreme speed, using his powers to force one of the hunters into a wall. The man then grabs the other enemy and throws him off one of the rocks, knocking him out in the process. At the end of the fight, Griffin reveals that these are the Paladins, a group of people who live to eliminate all jumpers on the planet. Now that they have been discovered in the Colosseum arena, the young man decides to flee, and David uses the teleportation trail to follow him. Disgusted by what the young man has just done, Griffin orders him to leave, while he tries to hide the information scattered around his house. On returning to the house, David tries to leave with Millie, but they end up being intercepted by the police, who decide to arrest the couple. At the police station, the girl asks the officers to release her friend, but they just ignore her, telling her to keep quiet and wait in reception. During David's interrogation, the officer receives the news that the local deputy has just arrived on the scene, and leaves the young man alone in the room. At that moment, Mary, the young man's mother, appears, and after handing her son the keys to his handcuffs, she orders him to leave immediately, and not to allow Millie to accompany him, otherwise she could be eliminated. Confused, the young man starts to chase his mother, but he ends up being intercepted by one of the policemen, who tries to grab him. In order to get rid of the man, David teleports him to one of the statues in Egypt and quickly returns to the police station. After meeting up with her friend, the young man tells her that the best thing to do at the moment is to get out of town, and Millie is confused and asks why her boyfriend is so agitated. However, David refuses to answer the girl's questions, and after gathering their bags, they set off for the airport. Soon afterwards, he says that he won't be able to accompany the girl on the flight home, as he doesn't want to involve her in his personal problems. Back in Ann Arbor, Roland decides to go to the young man's old residence. And after being greeted by William, the man reveals that he is a federal agent and begins to interrogate him, asking where his son is. However, the old man claims that David hasn't been seen for 8 years, and despite contacting the authorities, they haven't been able to find him. Roland then asks about the whereabouts of the young man's mother, and William replies that the woman abandoned them when their son was only 5 years old, and since then he has never heard from her. At home, Griffin plays his video game alongside his newest companion, who is nothing more than the body of one of the Paladins he eliminated earlier. Suddenly, David appears and asks the young man why they are being targeted by these hunters, since they have never done anything wrong to them. Griffin explains that since medieval times, jumpers have been hunted down and eliminated by the Paladins, who, thanks to their religious superstitions, believe that people like these should never have existed. What's more, the young man reveals that these agents are completely insane, and have even wiped out several families so that they could track down their targets. Upon hearing this, David becomes extremely worried and teleports to his father's house, but as soon as he arrives there, he realizes that the man is no longer alive, and uses his powers to take him to the hospital. The next day, the jumper returns to Griffin's house, and his friend tells him that he has just returned from another hunt for the Paladins, and has taken one of them to the Atlantic Ocean, so that the man can swim with the sharks. David then asks to use his friend's photographs so that he can find Roland and protect his girlfriend, but Griffin stops him, saying that the hunter is more powerful than he realizes. Nevertheless, David tells him that they can try to work together, and reveals that as long as Roland is alive, Millie is in great danger. However, Griffin persists in going it alone, and orders the young man not to try to follow him. With that, the jumper uses his power, and completely ignoring the request, David chases the young man, using the teleportation trail to follow him. In doing so, the young man ends up in the kitchen of a Japanese restaurant, and after leaving the establishment, he begins to follow Griffin through the streets of Tokyo. David explains that if they decided to team up as a real duo, they would become unbeatable and could merge their information to find and eliminate Roland. Despite this, the young man insists on rejecting his friend's company and teleports into a car dealership. Now that they have a luxury car, the jumpers drive through the streets at high speed, using their teleports to perform various maneuvers around the city. During the ride, Griffin reveals that he met a jumper who had tried to take out an entire building with his power, but expended so much energy that he perished in the middle of his attempt. After a long night's travel with his new friend, the jumper decides to help him search for Millie, but when they teleport to the airport, they realize that the girl's flight has already landed more than an hour ago. So the pair decide to split up, and Griffin tells him that he's going to get his weapons, while David looks for his girlfriend. The young man quickly goes to the girl's house and, upon meeting her again, reveals that he has never worked in a bank and that they need to leave as soon as possible. At that moment, the young man notices that Roland has just arrived, and acts quickly, teleporting to Griffin's house, along with Millie. Soon after, the group of Paladins enters the apartment, and using his detection spray, the leader finds David's translocation trail. With that, the hunter's assistants prepare a highly technological machine, capable of reopening teleport holes created by the jumpers. Once through the portal, the Paladins reach Griffin's house and start looking for the young men, who are hiding behind the concrete pillars. While trying not to be seen by the hunters, David comes across a photo of his mother, and thanks to this distraction, he ends up being seen by one of his enemies, causing Roland to capture him instantly. Taking advantage of the fact that his target is caught in the electric traps, the leader approaches and prepares his dagger to finish the young man off. David asks why they are so keen to eliminate the jumpers, since they have never harmed anyone, and Roland replies that sooner or later, the superhuman power of these mutants will corrupt their minds and turn them into real threats to humanity. At that moment, Griffin attacks the hunters with his flamethrower, causing them to retreat and saving his friend's life. However, Roland is still alive, and charges at the young man, who ends up being captured by one of his electrical cables. Believing that he has managed to incapacitate the two jumpers, the man prepares to eliminate Griffin, while revealing that he was responsible for the elimination of his family. Upon hearing this, the young man becomes extremely furious and performs a powerful teleport attack on the man, causing him to break through the cave wall and be thrown outside. So that she can rescue her boyfriend, Millie goes into hiding and starts looking for David. Outside, Griffin uses his powers to escape from Roland, and to attack him, he teleports a bus from London to the desert, which runs over the old man and destroys the young man's entire base. Thanks to all the destruction, Millie ends up in a state of shock, and so that his friend's girlfriend isn't eliminated, Griffin attacks the cowardly Paladin once again with his flamethrower. To escape the fire, Roland uses the portal he had opened earlier, returning to the girl's house, but the jumper is increasingly furious, and as he doesn't plan to give up so easily, he goes after his adversary, continuing the fight throughout the place. With that, Millie finally manages to free David, who after apologizing to her, prepares to take her back home, but at that moment, Griffin appears, reporting that he has managed to steal the portal machine, so the hunters are trapped on the other side of the teleport. The problem is that a few seconds before the translocation trail closes, Roland manages to use one of his cables to capture Millie and pull her to the other side of the rift. Desperate, the young man says he's going to get his girlfriend, but Griffin forbids him and reveals that he plans to send a bomb to the young woman's house, as the entire squad of Paladins is gathering inside. Believing that his friend could end up eliminating Millie with all his madness, David decides to flee with the explosive compartment, and is pursued by his ally. After exchanging several blows at the top of one of Egypt's pyramids and chasing each other across one of the region's urban bridges, the young men continue the fight, opening cracks in various places around the world as they compete for the detonator device. At this point, David teleports to the top of a building and throws the device towards the ground, but Griffin doesn't give up and tries to retrieve the object. So the young man ends up going after him, and during the fight in the skies, they teleport to a large pool and manage to cushion the fall. Soon afterwards, David goes to the middle of the Arctic Ocean, and to prevent his partner from destroying the device, Griffin appears with a vehicle and uses it to run over the young man. Before they fall into the freezing water, the youngsters teleport to a war field where a major military confrontation is taking place. Without wasting any time, the man retrieves the detonator, and before leaving, he says goodbye to his friend. Thanks to the destruction that the military firefight is causing, one of the electricity installations begins to collapse, and on noticing this, David grabs hold of Griffin, forcing the young man to teleport with him into the middle of the tower's electrical wires. Now that he has finally defeated his companion, the young man returns to Ann Arbor, where he tries to infiltrate Millie's house. The problem is that it was all just an ambush, and as soon as he approaches his girlfriend, the young man is quickly captured by the Paladins, who attach several electrical cables to his body. Furious at everything Roland has caused in his life, David tries to channel all his power, generating a small earthquake that begins to destroy Millie's entire home. With that, the young man takes his power to the maximum level, and after destroying a large part of the place, he teleports along with a piece of the house, ending up at the bottom of the city's river. In a few seconds, the entire structure is torn apart by the water, which begins to drown the young people. Millie quickly frees herself and manages to swim to David, who, to stop her from drowning, takes the remains of the house to the public library, completely devastating the place. After catching her breath, the girl crawls to her boyfriend, but before they can escape, Roland comes out from under the rubble. To protect Millie, the young man takes her to the other side of the library and then teleports to the old man. There, David tells him that he will never be the kind of jumper that the Paladins bothered to destroy, and instead of eliminating him, the young man decides to spare the man and abandons him in the middle of a huge desert, thousands of kilometers away from civilization. A few days later, the young man goes to his mother's house and asks her why she abandoned him as a child. Upon hearing this, Mary reveals that she had always been part of the Paladins, and when she realized that her son was a jumper at the age of 5, she decided to leave, otherwise she would be forced to eliminate him. Despite being a member of the Macabre Hunters, the woman says she will give David another chance and asks him to be more careful from now on. Now that he's free, the jumper reunites with his girlfriend so that they can start their next trip around the world. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.